Hello, sophomore seminary class. My name is Kristen Hansen, and I'm going to share my story today about how I joined the church. Growing up, my best friend was LDS. Her name was Tiffany, and I spent a lot of time in her home. So she was my good friend throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I was in her home quite a bit. She was the oldest of 5, so she had 4 younger siblings. And I just remember being in her home, and she would have a lot of chores to do, and she had to babysit her younger siblings quite a bit. And so I feel like I learned some cleaning skills in her home just because I was the youngest and didn't have a lot of chores. But there was a special spirit in her home, and when I was around her and her family, that I felt. She invited me to a number of activities. I went to Mutual a few times, and some other activities. I went to a couple stake dances. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most is my experience at girls' camp. She invited me I went a couple of different years, and the young women will know what I'm talking about, but there's just kind of this fun, crazy, special experience that happens at girls' camp, and I still remember. I remember the area that we were in, and those big tall trees, and some of the hikes, and the lake we swam in, and so I haven't talked a lot about that, but it does really stand out to me. It was just a really fun time. And there was a testimony meeting, which at the time I really didn't know what that was, but we were all gathered around sitting on these logs, and there was definitely a special feeling that came, came to me. And I remember everyone standing up, and then all of a sudden I was standing up, and I don't know quite what I said, and I'm sure it wasn't communicated very well, but I just remember it being a good time, and I was grateful that I was invited to go to girls' camp with her. And I think some seeds were planted there, definitely. So fast forward a little bit, I moved around to the Seattle area in California with my mom, and maintained my friendship with my good friend. And we would write letters back then, and we talked a lot, and we would see each other in the summers. We'd visit each other, and I ended up originally was going to go to WSU, but I went on a block. They had a block system, so I went to a church school, Ricks College in Rexburg, with my friend as a non-member, which was kind of a big deal because I wasn't a member, and I thought, well, we'll go try this out and see how I like it. And I loved it. I had 6 roommates, and we had the best time. It was so much fun. They definitely were a positive influence. And we had a group of FHE brothers that we got together with and did some fun things. And I attended, I was just in this environment where it was hard not to feel the Spirit, or I guess everyone has the light of Christ. So it was good. There was a special feeling that came. I ended up taking the discussions from the sister missionaries twice, just because I wanted to make sure I was joining the church for the right reasons. And I got baptized when I was 19. And fast forward a little bit further, and I ended up marrying one of those FHE brothers in the Salt Lake City temple. And just a side note, I'm going to show you this because Brother Hansen has some hair. Can you see that? Oh, I drew that. Okay. So that was a fun day. A side story is that the day we got married in the Salt Lake temple, there was a tornado that came through. All around the temple and the temple grounds. We were inside the temple at the time, so I had no idea what was going on. And I know some of you already know this story, but it was a fun day. We came outside, and there was trees that were uprooted, so we got a few pictures next to those, and we had some good stories from some of our family members that were there that day. Fast forward a couple more years, and we had this cute, chubby baby that joined our family, and we named him Cole. And then we later had a another little baby boy and baby girl. And here I am today, 18 years later. And I can't imagine my life without the gospel. I'm so grateful for it. And I think one of the things that drew me to the church the most was the family-centered focus that the church has. That really, really drew me in, and I knew that that's what I wanted for my family. Okay, so now the important part, some tips or encouragement on how you can talk to your friends about the gospel. Number one on my list is to be a true friend. I think that's so important to be a good friend and show love to those around you. Number two, invite your friends to activities. And I know a lot of you already do that, but invite them to church activities. And if you're not inviting them to church activities, talk about the activities that you're attending that are church-centered, so that maybe if they're afraid to ask something, you're bringing up the topic of something you did. And sometimes questions stem from activities or events that you're talking about, because most likely they do have questions. They're just maybe afraid to ask too. So you might be afraid to share the gospel, but they probably have questions that they're afraid to ask. So if you're inviting them and talking about those activities, then some conversation hopefully will come up. Next, I would say, even if you're afraid to talk about the gospel, your actions you can be an example through your actions. I promise you that your non-member friends they'll notice that you have cleaner language and that you dress more modestly and that you have higher standards. They will definitely notice that. So again, sometimes your actions speak louder than words. And I think last, I can offer you some suggestions, and your leaders and parents can offer you suggestions on how to talk to friends about the gospel, or maybe they suggest that you invite a friend to an activity, but really it needs to be a personal experience. So I would recommend that you pray to your Heavenly Father and ask that experience to be personal, and ask Him on how you can share the gospel. And the next part of that is acting on those promptings that will come, because if you're praying about it, most likely those promptings will come, and it's acting on those promptings that sometimes is the hard part. But once you do it one time, then it gets easier for the next time. And I think that's all I have.